organizers, my fellow comrades in making this event possible. Welcome to the second session of Yuli of Star Confex 6th edition. And once again, we are competing with only 5 teams left until finally we can decide who wins this tournament. So I guess we shouldn't delay it any more longer than we should. I believe that we can immediately hop on towards the next presentations coming from KYS. They're on their Sustainable Development Goal 14 and 15, life on land and below water. And with that, I pass the floor to you.
Hello, can I be heard? Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, panel of judges. The Holocene extinction is the ongoing 6th mass extinction of history that is a result of colonialism. Not a colonialism of nations with nations, but of humans towards the animal world who share the same earth but don't share the same rights. There exists an evil that is grounding the weight of wildlife survival and sustainable life. The name of that evil, ladies and gentlemen, is ignorance and inaction. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh, and good morning to all. It is an honor for me to represent Colleges and Sangat, together with the United Nations Convention of Animal Health and Protection, together with the United Nations Framework Convention for Climate Change, both of these councils, to contribute as a global effort in protecting life on land, together with below water, on the theme of power of the past, force of the future. On the account of the model, what am I going to look at? There are 4 things here. Firstly, I'm going to talk about the current problems that everyone must be aware of. Secondly, we'll talk about the actions that we will take to curb these problems together with a proper mechanism put in place. Thirdly, we're going to justify these actions as well as say why is it that these actions are of most importance. And lastly, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to talk about the impacts of such actions on the animals affected together with the overall condition of the world. And just to add on to it, we're going to look into all of these together with an anthropocentric perspective to emphasize how important this issue is even towards human beings. Firstly then, let's simplify what our sustainable development goals want to achieve as to just not confuse everyone. There are 2 SDGs that we're focusing on. Firstly, number 14, life below water. To simplify, it just basically means that we are using marine resources in a sustainable manner in order to protect the life underwater, meaning, for example, fish, coral reefs, such and such. Why is it that this SDG is really important? And we identify 2 reasons here. Firstly, seas and oceans that are healthy are vital towards human survival. We rely on them for food, energy, and water because they basically make up 70% of our world. Nevertheless, we've just been able to severely degrade these priceless resources under status quo. Second SDG we're going to focus on is life on land. What life on land means is usually just reducing habitat destruction that currently exists of animals that exist on land. So meaning mammals, birds, things like such and such. Why is it that this SDG becomes really important towards us? We identify 2 reasons. Firstly, the basis of human existence on our planet is a thriving land life, ladies and gentlemen, meaning that it is ensuring that biodiversity and ecosystem is being maintained. The second reason is that we have all contributed to this planet's environment, to the planet's degradation, meaning things like, for example, deforestation, the loss of natural habitats, and land degradation, and we have severely harmed them. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, what is it the problem that we're facing in status quo? We identify 2 issues. Firstly, an insufficient prioritizing of efforts towards animal welfare. I think this just means that there's a lack of awareness, meaning that there's a lack of ideas being put out there, lack of policies being put in place. The second and most important harm and problem we're facing right now is that there are legal loopholes committed by corporations. There are several reasons for this, mainly lack of transparency, lack of enforcement, the labeling of animal treatment in products. For example, fast fashion companies with going green, when all they do is kind of just still contribute towards the landfills and contributes towards throwing their products into landfills, ladies and gentlemen. And because of all those reasons, we think that there's something that needs to be done from it. Therefore, what needs to be done, ladies and gentlemen? We identify two parts of how this action is going to be committed. First part is how we're going to learn from the past to make a better future. That's to say, we're going to look into future technologies. And secondly, we're using what is already powerful in the past as a force for the future in and of itself, ladies and gentlemen. Therefore, in terms of concrete things that we're going to do, ladies and gentlemen, we identify two things. Firstly, we're going to provide aid towards governments to provide subsidies towards things like farming companies. Secondly, we're going to prioritize efforts we're going to prioritize efforts towards climate change mitigation inside of the national budget via things like, for example, councils in the United Nations, ladies and gentlemen. Therefore, the mechanism of how we're going to do this, ladies and gentlemen, we identify three things. Firstly, we're going to remind nations about the Universal Declaration of the Animal Rights of 1977 that says that all animals are born equal and have the same rights to exist. Second, we're going to stress on the Paris Agreement International Treaty, which is a part of the United Nations FCCC, which talks about things like, for example, climate change and that sort of chat. Third part, we're going to note the past efforts of all parties involved, things like, for example, nations, NGOs, as well as the private sector that's involved with the awareness and education programs that currently exist in status quo, but we're going to use them as a stepping stone in order for us to further these sort of efforts, prioritize these certain efforts in order for us to be able to make a world better. Therefore, this requires a lot of funding in order for us to be able to do so. The way we're going to get this sort of funding, ladies and gentlemen, is via things like, for example, using resources or getting a sort of donation fund from certain countries, as well as if individuals want to personally fund them themselves, we'll allow them to do so. What can be done with the fundings, ladies and gentlemen? Three things. Firstly, investment for new technologies. We're going to explain how is it that new technologies are going to work later on in my speech. Second part, awareness programs. These are things that already exist currently. We're going to put more efforts towards these campaigns, more money that's going to be funded and channeled into awareness programs. And we think those are essentially really important. Lastly, ladies and gentlemen, conditional aid for governments. This means that we are able to say towards like governments of certain countries that you must follow a certain like standard in order for them to get some form of aid or like to gain some form of subsidies. We'll also be able to give unconditional subsidies towards governments who just can't thrive as well as developed countries. We're going to say that, okay, we're going to provide you these sort of subsidies in order for your farming companies to be able to grow. What are things that farming companies can essentially do, ladies and gentlemen? We identify three things. Firstly, more sustainable farming, ladies and gentlemen. Why is that so? Because things like, for example, conservation tillage, integrated pest management, reduce fertilizer and pesticide use, ladies and gentlemen, to reduce the negative impacts of agriculture on the environment, as well as to improve the soil health and ocean and prevent things like ocean acidification, things like such and such. And therefore, ladies and gentlemen, another part in which this funding is going to be funneled into is from that first benefit, which is about the technologies that are going to exist. We say, ladies and gentlemen, like even if you were to look into the World Scholars Cup syllabus, ladies and gentlemen, there are a lot of like sort of technologies that already exist that are still in research, but they just don't have enough of that research, ladies and gentlemen, in order to make them be in fruition, ladies and gentlemen. Things like, for example, carbon sequestration, things like, for example, things like capturing carbon and prevent the harms of global warming that currently exists. We say, ladies and gentlemen, the more innovative based in solutions in this sort of like circumstance will be able to ensure that countries or even private sectors have that sort of competition and to be able to look into the innovations and to be able to ensure that that the environment of our country, environment of the world, ladies and gentlemen, is able to be maintained. Lastly, ladies and gentlemen, the direct impacts of the resolution. As aside from the innovation-based solutions that we've already talked about, there are more responsible behaviors towards animals and to ensure the extent of animals, to ensure that they are able to live and to ensure that there's no things like, for example, illegal deforestation that can consistently happen because there is now at least more of a priority towards these issues. There's more of enforcement towards these laws currently that exist in countries. Countries are more likely to be incentivized to do things like enact laws or things like upgrade the sort of laws that currently exist in the world. Therefore, why is it justified for us to do this? We identify three levels of analysis. Firstly, on why is it that humans have a principal duty and principal obligation to do so. Note, three levels of analysis. Firstly, these lives, the lives of animals, hold some form of right and ground to live alongside us humans. We hold a moral ascendancy by virtue of us being humans in order to protect animals all over the world. Second layer, why human beings are culpable for legitimizing the oppression towards the animal race. The human race, ladies and gentlemen, is responsible for doing things like industrial and residential development, things like logging, pesticide use, things like, for example, using animals for entertainment, food, and things like fashion, ladies and gentlemen, which results in things like poaching. And we don't think those things are justified under the status quo, ladies and gentlemen. And because of all those reasons, there has to be some form of awareness, some form of idea that individuals have in order for them to be able to be more responsible towards animals, ladies and gentlemen. And with that, it's justified for us to do so. Just to throw out of the discussion today, several other impacts that can affect the world today. Okay, in things like, for example, ensuring food security, it ensures like things, for example, economic growth, ladies and gentlemen. Because why? Because what Sda told you already was that economic growth can lead to a lot of other things that might be effective, ladies and gentlemen. Things like, for example, food security, ladies and gentlemen. Things like, for example, ensuring that economic instability doesn't really happen. Things like green tourism or competition by private sectors and investments, ladies and gentlemen. And lastly, we're able to mitigate these sort of harms of climate change and as an indirect response to that, ladies and gentlemen. Because of all those reasons, note, ladies and gentlemen, make no mistake. Notice that currently countries like China are producing oxygen sprays as a means of mitigating the harm that climate change has caused due to our own actions. There's an inherent need for us to do so. In order for you to keep your cute fish, your cute beavers, ladies and gentlemen, all your cute animals that exist currently, there has to be something that needs to be done. Holocene extinction must be halted. We are so proud to propose.
Thank you very much, KRS, for that very interesting and quite out of the world presentation. Now, obviously, from the slide, you can see that now it's time for the Q&A session. Are there any questions from the judges for their presentation?
May I ask a question? Thank you, Omar, for the wonderful presentation. I was trying to understand again, how is your proposed solutions about farming is related to life of wildlife on land and underwater? Because the issue is extension is related to overhunting and illegal hunting. I think these are the main issues that we are facing now. Is my question clear?
Can I just reiterate? The question is, how is it that farming companies also hold a responsibility in trying to ensure that climate change preservation is maintained? Is that correct?
Yes, in the sense that the issue that we are facing now with especially wild animals is illegal hunting or over hunting, excessive hunting, which is causing the distinction of these animals. Thank you.
KRS, you seem to be muted.
Oh, hello. Yes. All right. I think I can answer that question. Firstly, we do agree that the problem currently is illegal hunting, and we are also working towards solving those sort of issues. The farming companies right now and the subsidies are due to three things. Firstly, ladies and gentlemen, is about the sustainable usage of things like technologies, ladies and gentlemen. Things like, for example, more controlled forms of farming that contribute towards ocean acidification, meaning that life on below water will also be affected by the lowered pH levels of the ocean. And we think that that's really important for us to notice then as well. Secondly, farming companies are the alternative towards meat products or animal products. Things like, for example, eating more vegetables or catering towards the vegan or vegetarian community and trying to widen the perspective of individuals in order for us to be able to give that narrative about the usage of vegetables in the farming, as well as the importance of farming industries. And because of that, we do agree that we have to solve the problem of illegal hunting. However, the idea of farming companies is the alternative towards that, so that people socially wouldn't need to opt into sort of animal products and opt into things like, for example, in fashion, where it's synthetic leather, so that they don't have to poach seals in the Antarctic. And we think that that's really important for us to consider. And therefore, farming companies still hold some form of responsibility and culpability in our world currently. I hope that solves your question.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions coming from Judge and the answers coming from KOS. May I ask if there are any more questions coming from the judges or? No, I think it's time for us to open the questions to the floor. If there are any questions coming from any other teams?
Yeah, FCA has a question.
Yes, you may ask the question.
All right, if I remember correctly, KYS said something about luring multinational companies into like green technology in order to make it more lucrative. However, if we see today, ExxonMobil has made $370 billion of profiting from oil sales and etc. And it's pretty imminent and it's pretty obvious that within like the next 20 to 30 years, green technology will never really be an opt-in for bigger multinational corporations to make a profit of. So this entire mechanism of trying to lure multinational corporations into green technology by making it profitable literally false. So like what's the next mechanism for KYS's policy in order to control multinational corporations?
Yeah.
I will leave that question for Amsha to answer. Thank you for that question.
Thank you very much, Omar. You talk about how a company have been like saying like green technologies won't be like a trend in the near future. But if you look into it a bit more, there's apparently innovation, green-based technology, environmental-based innovation has been made throughout the years. Even you see now, even like fast food chains, restaurant, about how they are going greener with their more biodegradable plastics, and also about how just innovations right now are more and more environmental-based than ever. And the fact that we are giving more subsidies, giving more profit, and giving them a chance to giving them subsidies and all will actually leads to them being more incentivized to go more greener than ever. You said about how it won't be make a much of a change, but do keep in mind that with the trend right now, and also the thing about in the future, it will be go a lot more greener than ever. It's also just the fact that about how innovations nowadays, about how giving subsidies could lead to a more environmental based innovations. With the fact that right now, most innovation, there are a lot of innovations happening with the innovation being a trend. I think we think that this all of our actions would be justified in order for the companies to be incentivized to going greener. Does that answer your question?
Yes,
to add on to that, there's already a trend in reusable energy resources by companies as well. Things like, for example, solar panels are also really big currently in technologies. And we think that that sort of competition, especially with the social trend that occurs, is something that is able to make these sort of technologies or this sort of trend towards better innovations more into fruition inside of the world that we're going to operate in.
Thank you very much. Answers coming from KYS. I think our question Q&A session has run out of time. So right now we'll have a little break so that the judges can fill in the scores and leave it to us. Just give us a second.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
Okay, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and welcome back after our short break. I guess we shouldn't delay any longer. Now we move on to the second presentation of the second session from MSKK on their Sustainable Development Goal Zero Hunger.
Okay, just give me a second to start my timer. All right, so I'll be beginning my speech in 3, 2, 1. Though it might seem intuitive to think that world hunger is concentrated exclusively in the continent of Africa, however, we tell that citizens from the impoverished global south all the way to the privileged global north are all at differing risk levels facing this issue, perpetuated by the policy failures of not just the state governments in which they reside in, but even the global bodies that sought to protect the sanctity of the international economy. And we tell that this is further exacerbated by the rising issue of climate change. Before I move on, Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. We are from MSKK and we will be presenting our resolution towards achieving the Sustainable Development Goal of Zero Hunger, powered by the power of the past. So now moving on. How do we define global hunger? We tell that global hunger is the insufficient availability of food, which results in the shortfalls in the nutritional status of children. We tell that this also extends to the heightening prices of food globally, which affects access to foods even in the most well-off countries. So how do we frame the scale and severity of global hunger? We tell that the scale and severity of global hunger looks like 8.9% of the world is suffering from malnutrition, in which this 8.9% is equivalent to 663 million people. And we tell that even if you look at the graph here, though the severity is concentrated within the continent of Africa, also pay attention to coastal states threatened by climate change. In fact, we tell that 22% of children have their growth stunted as a consequence of poor nutrition, in which we tell you that this child malnutrition will affect an entire generation's worth of latent potential, affecting the ability to govern in the long run. So how do we pinpoint the causes of world hunger towards achieving our goals? We tell you that we give you two models. Firstly, we try to analyze the problem of climate change towards the global production and towards the production of foods. And secondly, we try to analyze distribution issues both globally and locally. So firstly, regarding the issue of climate change, right, we need to understand the impacts that climate change has on food security. By looking at the graph here, we get to understand that firstly, climate change affects agro-ecosystems, which lessens supply aggregate, thus driving prices up. We tell you that this looks like climate change affecting the supply aggregate. For example, droughts causing crop yields to be low, while demand for said crops continue to remain high, thus causing inflation. We tell you that external factors like recessions, depressions, and inflations actively affect productive capital in food industries that reduces the supply output. We tell that increased inflation and recessions are a consequence of climate change that affects global food security. For example, how recessions in Haiti threaten global rice food security. We tell you that firstly, this is further compounded by external economic issues like recessions, lowering produce. For example, how recessions put farmers out of their jobs. And we tell that climate change is exclusively and especially disruptive, as there can be no fiscal or monetary policy to essentially control it. Thus, we tell that it's a problem that's exclusively out of the human jurisdiction. So now moving on to our first case study, which is sub-Saharan Africa. We know that the food security issues in sub-Saharan Africa throughout the decades like firstly, colonial African governments from 1864 to 1915, which pushed for economic dependency coupled with a lack of advanced agricultural tech, the exploitation of resources as seen in the Western scramble for Africa, and the historically unpredictable weather patterns have driven Africa into a state of perpetual food security from the get-go. Tell that this persists today as a result of dependence on food imports, poor management systems to keep track of agricultural productions, and increasingly violent weather patterns historically. And we tell that in fact, Kenya FuseNet, for example, the Famine Early Warning System Network, reported of resurgence in famine rates in sub-Saharan Africa following the fifth poor weather season in the season of March-May 2022. So what are the regional solutions that we set out for sub-Saharan Africa? We know that firstly, we have to enable technology transfers en masse to provide the region with climate resilient, high yielding crops to strengthen local food production. Secondly, we tell that monetary and fiscal policy needs to be reformed in order to attract foreign investors into the region to stimulate these said tech transfers. And finally, we must also recognize that the top-down systemic change in order to track vital food production, storage, and distribution. This looks like systemic reforms by weeding out corruption and providing more stable and more powerful and more stable governments which are able to take control of the nation's economic situations. So moving on. So what are the global solutions that we set out for climate change? We tell that we need to pursue heavier and more widespread enforcement of carbon taxes as seen in the European Union, and we must also subsidize the transition of industries into green tech, such as seen in the United States. So now moving on to tackling the issue of distribution, right? Firstly, we tell that we divide it into two contexts. Firstly, in which the local context, it looks like the decline of local industries. For example, how Haiti used to be self-sufficient on rice. However, due to the massive influx of imports of American rice flowing into Haiti, the local rice production industry slowly started to decline. And secondly, we tell that globally we also have to deal with global supply chain disruptions. For example, in which the Russo-Ukrainian war, in which Western sanctions against Russia and the industry collapse in Ukraine happened as a result of the ensuing war. So now moving on, how do we address these global distribution issues? Firstly, we have to concede to the fact that globalization has helped dampen hunger issues across multiple countries. However, the same system that has brought fortune to many countries may bring detriment to the entire system. For example, how the global supply chain is constantly at risk and constant intervention and management is needed by bodies like the International Monetary Fund. And we tell that these same systems are extremely susceptible to global international disruptions. For example, grain shortages following the Russo-Ukrainian war. And we tell that diversification efforts from the International Monetary Fund post-disruption are ongoing, and the impacts are still being felt by countries like Egypt. So moving on to the second case study, right? That's the Great Recession. That's the Great Recession of 2007 to 2009. In order to comprehend this phenomenon, we tell that firstly, the Great Recession was a period of market general decline that affected every nation worldwide. We tell that the causes of the Great Recession include a combination of vulnerabilities that developed in the financial system, along with a series of triggering events that began with the bursting of the United States housing bubble. And we tell that post-housing bubble burst, financial institutions failed along with the dollar, and as most of the world's finance and banking is tethered to the dollar, cascading effects start to materialize. This looks like depreciating currency and decreasing credit as one of the ensuing effects, slowing GDP growth worldwide. So with the combination of these events, eventually this event cascaded to threaten Mexican food security. So what does it look like? We tell that this looks like the significant increase among severely food insecure households, about 8% in 2008 to close to 10% in 2010. So now let's put the scale of global disruption into context. We tell that quantity-wise, Russia is currently the world's largest exporter of wheat, accounting for about 16.9% of global exports in 2021. The combined annual wheat exports from Russia and Ukraine, about 60 million tons, are equivalent to 30% of the world's total exports. And we tell that 30% of the world exports are already being leveraged. The fact that 30% of the world's supply already being leveraged in Ukraine and Russia is already an alarming sign to diversify our supply chains. Now, what are the policy solutions that we set out to fix here? Firstly, we tell that international bodies like the World Economic Forum and the International Monetary Fund have to take efforts to mitigate the risk by essentially incentivizing other smaller nations to also simultaneously contribute to the world supply chain. And we thought that secondly, these bodies and these state governments must also diversify their supply chains. For example, how Japanese efforts to diversify their tech manufacturing industry away from China under the Economic Security Initiative. So now moving on to the final issue on how we address local distribution issues. We know that firstly, the reliance on local produce and isolationist trading policies is just as disruptive as relying on imports, as we've seen in sub-Saharan Africa previously. We tell that, however, the globalization of produce and market is inevitable for most nations. Thus, both the IMF and state governments need to address this issue and establish policy reforms in response. So moving on to our final case study, there's the Haiti rice crisis. We tell that Haiti has a reliance on local imports rather than domestic rice productions. We tell that this same nation has experienced widespread crop failures in 2015 as a result of climate change. We tell you that Haiti's problems stem from the structural adjustment policies promoted by the World Bank and the IMF, in which their rice tariffs were reduced from 50% to 3%. So in summary, Haiti was incentivized by policies set by the Clinton administration and working in tandem with the IMF to import American subsidized rice and import locally produced rice globally, to the point that they were consuming just under 40% of what they were producing locally. So what solution that we set out to solve here? Firstly, we need to recognize that state governments have to always put local produce at the forefront while striking a balance between imported products. We tell that secondly, international monetary and finance institutions must enact trade protectionist policies for more vulnerable third world nations. And we tell that this policy of protectionism includes tariffs, quotas, and subsidies, in which all of these tools are meant to promote domestic companies by making foreign goods more expensive or scarce. And we tell that finally, local governments must also subsidize local production. So what are the conclusions that we can draw here? Firstly, we must keep climate change at bay as it is imperative to secure production and price stability. Secondly, diversification and maintenance of the global supply chain mitigate or even eliminate the risk of cascading effects globally. And we tell that finally, the maintenance of local food production and local food production and putting brakes on food import protect the most vulnerable produce in the local market. And with that, thank you very much. Yeah, so moving on to the Q&A session.
Okay, thank you very much, MCK, for that wonderful presentation. Now we move on to the Q&A session. Judges, are there any Q&As that you might want? Are there any questions that you might want to ask? If there are no questions from the judges, we like to open the Q&A session to the floor. So any participants who might have a question about MCK's presentation?
We have one.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Okay, regarding your solution on the technology, on introducing new technologies to these poor countries, my question here is why should I have two questions actually. Number one is why should the other richer countries send help or technology to these poor countries in terms of agriculture, while your hybrid seeds and all that? And number two, realize that even if with all the solutions on increasing the supply of food, the major problem that you are now failing to acknowledge here is about the accessibility of the food itself, because realize that the majority of people who are experiencing world hunger is actually poor. And even if you are trying to subsidize these foods, they also means increases in taxes and all the higher living standards. So how do you solve that? Thank you.
Firstly, on the issue which first world nations do not have an incentive to help like poorer nations, right? Firstly, we tell you at least if you want to engage in the context of like South Africa exclusively, we tell you that many like nations like China and both the US have an active incentive to actively expand their influence into the region from an international relations perspective. So we tell you that nations always have an incentive to transfer technologies into smaller nations as a part of expanding their influence. Now, even if you don't want to buy that analysis, right? We tell you that we tell you that bigger nations also have a collective global moral responsibility to provide them with these seeds, because countries like the United States always want to seem like the moral arbiter of everything. They want to seem like a morally justified superpower. So we tell you that providing aid to countries like Africa will only help them in these endeavors. Secondly, you're trying to frame us in the context in which we aren't engaging with the accessibility question. The entire reason that we push a narrative of balance between local industries and between a secure global supply chain is to actually accommodate this issue. Because we tell you that we're trying to get from the wrong. We tell you that you're looking at the problem from the wrong context here. It isn't about third world nations suddenly keeping like food reserves or suddenly keeping food reserves from the poor. we tell that this actively looks like in excess of production in first world nations, like I've mentioned previously about how we actively import, about how US farmers actively import their produce into Haiti. We tell that in that context we need to achieve a balance in which Haiti farmers can actively buy into their own, can actively produce their own local produce, and even strike a balance between buying local imports. Now, even if you don't want to buy the analysis, we tell you that we already told you that we want to chase structural reforms in governments. That is to say that there are now social security policies that actively benefit the poor when it comes to food distribution. Okay, does that answer your question?
Answers came from MKK. I think we have room for at least one more question.
I think there is a question from KYS.
I'll go ahead.
Good luck, Adam. All right, no, I'm joking. All right, so I actually have several questions here. Firstly, I don't understand how is it that your entire policy on protectionism of certain countries to ensure that that local companies are still going to be kept relevant in a certain country. However, at the same time, then still request for certain assistance and trade from outside countries as well, which that kind of contradicts that sort of part. And secondly, even if we were to debate on the even talk about the best part where you're still able to get some form of influence from China or United States, note that then it will also lead to things like, for example, the China's BRI initiative that will lead to long-term harms towards towards the countries that do ask for certain assistance. That will also lead to things like United States and China forming hegemonies in this sort of regions. And why is it that you're okay with mitigating those? Why is it you're okay with having those sort of harms in the name of the short-term benefit you do get to solve some form of hunger in the short term towards the citizens of these poorer countries?
Wait, I want to reiterate. The first question was about the protectionism policy contradicting the global health policy, right? Come on. Okay, I'm just going to answer that.
Yep.
Okay, so firstly,
Yep, right.
I think that trade protectionism policies doesn't necessarily disincentivize first world countries from helping, because sure there should be tariffs on their exported produce. However, the exports still need to happen, and we tell that globalization doesn't necessarily need to look like it. Globalization and participation in the global economy just has to look like this Haiti opening up to trade. And we tell that if we did want to abandon those trade, we did want to abandon those protectionist policies, it would literally just look like status quo in which Haiti is just being used as like an export destination for American farmers. So we tell that sure, we can pursue both protectionist policies and globalization because we can pursue both protectionist and globalization policies, because globalization in any context needs to happen whatsoever, as globalization is an inevitable wave and isolationism is already from the get-go irrelevant in today's global economy. Secondly, on the forming of global hegemonies, right? I think that firstly I agree from a perspective that the existence of two global hegemonies at once and the existence of a watching international community that acts like a moral arbiter, for example, the UN and the international community that watches, and how diplomats tend to condemn immoral things like Chinese pollution, Russian aggression. We tell that these are active checks and balances against countries going as so far to actively exploit other nations. And we tell that the existence of two global hegemonies at once essentially even out the powers. And we tell that sure, even if you wanted to use the context of China's Belt and Road Initiative as a bad example, we tell that at least in the context of world hunger, this really doesn't apply. We tell that China's Belt and Road Initiative only applies as to expanding their own hegemonies and forming their own trade rings. However, we tell that the issue of food security is still equal across the board. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Answers coming from MKK and the questions coming from participants. I believe that ends the Q&A session for MKK. We now give some time for the judges to fill in the forms and give their remarks to us. Thank you, judges, for filling in the forms. Now we move on to the next team, SESMA, with their SDG 14 and 15, life on land and below water.
All right, can you hear me? I can start now, right?
We can hear you, we can hear you.
Okay. For centuries, people have assumed that the ocean was limitless and immune to human impacts. All living things survive within the all favorable zones of the environment. Thus, the environment is not something that can be neglected easily without caring for it. Although the environment can continue to survive in its natural state, human intervention has caused extensive destruction in many ecosystems. The ocean makes the earth habitable for all humankind. In fact, we live on a blue planet, which the oceans and seas cover more than 70% of the Earth's surface. As a matter of fact, drinking water, atmospheric conditions, food, and the air we breathe are provided and regulated by the ocean. Now, the oceans are facing a multitude of threats which endanger both nature and humans. That's leading to the loss of marine biodiversity as well as weakening the ocean ecosystem. Hence, this has been a hindrance for its ability to withstand disturbances and to adapt to climate change. Therefore, protecting our ocean is important so that it can play its role as a global ecological and climate regulator. However, let's not forget that we also need to protect the life on land. Forests are the lungs of the planet that's vital to life on Earth. They purify the air we breathe, filter the water we drink, prevent erosion, and act as an important buffer against climate change. The effects of human-caused global warming are happening now are irreversible for not only humankind, but also for other living things. Plus, according to WWF, for the past 2 years in 2020, the tropics have lost more than 12 million hectares of tree cover. That's roughly 30 soccer fields worth of trees every single minute.
Shasma, do you have a problem with your screen share?
Sorry.
Sorry, my internet is having a problem. I cannot.
Yeah, we
Cannot
cannot share
share
screen due
If
to the
you
internet
cannot
problem.
share your screen, we can do
Yeah,
it
yeah,
as
yeah.
you may give us the slides and we will present it for you.
All right.
Shasma, you will have to present from the start again.
All right, all right. Share the presentation.
Do restart your presentation now that you can present. Thank you very much.
All right, I'm sorry. Okay, so like I said, for centuries, our ocean have been assumed that which was limitless and immune to human impacts, and all living things survive within all favorable zones of the environment. But the environment is not something that we can neglect easily without caring for it. Although the environment can continue to survive in its natural state, human intervention has caused extensive destruction in many ecosystems. The ocean makes the earth habitable for all humankind. In fact, we live on a blue planet where ocean and seas cover more than 70% of the Earth's surface. And drinking water, atmospheric conditions, food, and the air we breathe are provided and regulated by the sea. Now the oceans are facing multitude of threats, which endanger both nature and humans, that's leading to the loss of marine biodiversity, as well as weakening the ocean ecosystem. So now, this has been a hindrance for its ability to withstand disturbances and to adapt to climate change. Therefore, protecting our ocean is important so that it can play its role as a climate regulator. However, let's not forget that we also need to protect the life on land. Forests are the lungs of the planet that's vital to life. On Earth. They purify the air we breathe, filter the water we drink, prevent erosion, and act as an important buffer against climate change. The effects of human-caused global warming are happening now are irreversible for not only humankind but also to other living things. And according to WWF, for the past 2 years, in soccer fields worth of trees every single minute. When we take away the forest, the entire ecosystem begins to fall apart with dire consequences for all of us. With that being said, forests and oceans are increasingly under stress because of human activities. Moving forward, from the past studies, it is proven that these concerns for the past decades have contributed to one of the world's biggest crises, which is climate change. So climate change is one of the major crises on our planet because over millions of years, species have become adapted to survive in conditions they live, but is unable to do so if the climate is unstable. But what is climate change? Climate change refers to long-term shifts in temperature and weather patterns or unpredictable weather changes at surface level. These shifts may seem natural, such as the variations in the solar cycle. Climate change is real and it will continue to accelerate. Since the 1800s, human activities have been the leading cause of climate change. Humans and wild animals face new challenges for survival because of climate change, such as droughts, storms, and ocean warming, which directly harm animals, destroy their habitats, and wreak havoc on people's livelihoods and communities. Now, let's take a look at one of the threats our planet faces till this day due to climate change. Natural disasters are extreme sudden events caused by environmental factors. One of the significant examples is flash floods. Flash floods affect human property and animals' habitat. Previously, in 1889, Johnstown flood was 40 foot high, which resulted in many folks being injured and homeless. This was an occurrence of the past. However, as of recently, according to the local news articles, in late 2022, Terengganu has recorded the highest number of flood victims in the country, with over 37,000 people displaced from their homes and estimated loss of 38.2 million ringgit. On the other hand, droughts affect farmers, making it hard for them to grow foods and crops for human food supply, leading to economic crisis and other health risks such as kwashiorkor, marasmus, due to nutrients deficiency. For example, Liberia is one of the worst countries among the 180 countries due to the droughts causing the land degradation or poor soil condition, with an EPI score of 22.6, making them incapable of producing crops or foods, leading to population hunger, malnutrition, and starvation. Plus, bear in mind, climate change may also contribute to another earthquake-related hazard. The NASA scientists acknowledge that glaciers are retreating is the trigger for the earthquakes in Alaska for the last decades and may pitch into the recent earthquakes in Turkey. All right, so next, wildfires have also been widely known to affect the biodiversity of life, like the 2020 bushfires in New South Wales, Australia, that killed an estimated 480 million animals. Another example of wildfires, which also happened in the same year, that occurred due to climate change, was the North Complex wildfire in California that left more than 400,000 acres burnt and displacing local wildlife like deers, bears, and coyotes. According to Professor Chris Dickman, the true loss of animal life is likely to be much higher than 480 million. So the next topic that surfaced due to climate change is ocean warming. The ocean has long taken the beatings of climate change. The ocean surface layer absorbs most of the excess heat and energy released from the gas emissions, leading to the rising ocean temperatures. Today, according to the United Nations, the ocean has absorbed 90% of the heat generated by the carbon emissions, in which excessive heat warms the ocean and influence unparalleled cascading effects, increasing ocean temperatures, glaciers melting, sea level rising, green heat waves, and ocean deoxygenation or low oxygenation content in the ocean. So due to the extreme weather, which has increased the glacier melting in the Arctic regions, the global sea level has broken a new high record in 2021. As you can see, it has risen to an average 4.5 millimeter per year over the period of 2013 and 2021, and is expected to continue. According to scientific studies and analysis, if the same amount of heat that has gone into the 2,000 meter of the ocean between 1955 and 2010 had gone beyond 10 kilometers of the ocean atmosphere, the Earth would have seen a warming of 36 degrees Celsius, in which I assure you, even without the backing of scientific concrete studies, as shown in the slides, this can totally induce such massive and irreversible impacts on not just the ocean ecosystem, but also the other living things, human beings and animals, both on land and below water. Rising temperatures also leads to ocean deoxygenation, in which ocean deoxygenation makes it nearly impossible for aquatic life to survive, which eventually destroys the life below oceans and significantly becomes a threat for the animals such as polar bears, which will be explained in further slides. So as you can see on the slide, these are the examples of endangered animals, which are polar bear, kangaroos, dugongs, and corals. Not to forget, polar bears has consistently topped the list of animal species that is likely to become extinct. In fact, biologists estimate there are only 25,000 to 30,000 polar bears left worldwide. This is only one of the many examples of endangered species among the many others. I am quite sure that you have probably heard the idiom tip of the iceberg at least once in your life, and we are telling you this is it. This is only the tip of the iceberg. In fact, if you look at the low estimate of number of species, which is around 2 million species, it is estimated that each year up to 2,000 species are in danger of extinction. But if we look at the upper estimate number of species, which is 100 million different species, it is expected that each year up to 100,000 of species are expected to be extinct. Since 1970, we've lost 69% of all wildlife populations. Plus, according to IUCN, over 1,500 marine animals and plants are at risk of extinction, with climate change impacting at least 41% of threatened marine species. And climate change is making our precious wildlife even more vulnerable. Hence, to avoid the worstens of climate change, we need to dramatically reduce it by implementing practical solutions and measures. So, as humans, everyone is responsible in saving our planet Earth. The effects of climate change are already threatening our health, our communities, our economy, and our security, and our children's future. Change only happens when individuals take action. Here are several easy, practical ways that each and one of us can make a difference. So firstly, by stopping and reporting any open burning, we can reduce the smoke emitted that pollutes the air quality. Secondly, by unplugging electronic devices, we can reduce carbon emissions that are absorbed by the oceans, which will bring us closer to a greener and healthier planet. This is actually an effortless action, and each and any one of us can do in order to reduce the carbon imprint. Thirdly, what we can do as individuals is that we can report any sightings of illegal human activities, such as blast fishing and poaching. These aforementioned actions need to be banned as it is an extremely irresponsible act of humankind. Other than that, through using active modes of transport, such as biking or walking, we can reduce the air pollution produced through conventional transportation, as well as an early prevention from chronic conditions such as heart disease. Apart from that, we can also use sustainable transport such as carpools or hybrid cars that produce less atmospheric pollution and improve air quality in cities. Moving forward, I can guarantee that almost all experts agree that the governments need to lead the fight against climate change. There are a number of effective ways or actions in the government can do in order to combat climate change, such as intensify efforts in planting mangroves in coastal areas, which can reduce the flooding impacts. Additionally, they should preserve more forests and increase rehabilitation centers, as well as provide more walkways and bicycle paths as an alternative to encourage the general public to actively use the active modes of transport, such as cycling and walking. Other than that, the government should introduce policies or tighten laws and give out executive orders to regulate human activities by setting catch limits or investing in areas such as health education. Meanwhile, the afforestation campaign, early education at schools, and social media exposure can be done by the government in spreading the awareness of climate change among the general public in saving the planet and making the earth habitable. Last but not least, while individuals alone may not able to make drastic changes in improving climate change, all these two categories, the individual and the government, need to form a synergy and come together in improving and saving the Earth's environment. That is all from my end. Thank you. So if you have any questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Sesma, for the wonderful presentation. Though I do have to recommend all teams after this, which is 2 teams only, to take care of their times, since some of that might be considered into the judging process.
All right.
Okay, now we move on to the Q&A sessions. Are there any questions from the judges?
Thank you, Nadia, for your presentation. Well, let me say that going back to the individual, what individuals can do to combat climate change, I would say that many of this has been kind of in place. People have been talking about it, yet we don't see much of implementation. Is it because of it's difficult for individuals to really commit to conserve the energy, to try to minimize water use, and to do all these kind of good practices which could help in combating climate change? In your opinion, what can we do about this? Thank you.
I'm sorry, but can you repeat that question one more time, because I can't really hear.
I'm referring to your suggestions on how we can combat climate change from individual perspective. So I'm talking about open burning, unplugging electronic devices. These kind of suggestions have been there for quite some time, yet we are not able to see much of implementation. This kind of maybe resistance from public. We can see some people who are doing so, but we can still see people dumping, rubbish in the rivers. So what do you think that the cause for this? What can we do about it? I mean, the suggestions are good. The implementation is not there. What's your thought about this? Thank you.
Implementation. That is a good question, but I think my friend here can help me out?
Yeah, sure. People can, as you can see, social media exposure can make people know about it more. So I think by using, by like influencers, any people that is famous can use their platforms to make a campaign or something like that, so that more people support the the ideas, these movements, so that more people will do the we unplugging their devices and things like that. So yes, I think that's it.
Any more questions?
Are there any more questions from the judges?
Okay, I just have one comment to make. During one of your earlier slides, you said that 70% of the earth is covered by forest.
Yeah.
I think you have to check that out, because if 70% of the earth is covered
Yes,
by
I'm so sorry. That is technical problem. So sorry for that.
Okay. As I said, you made a statement in one of your earlier slides that 70% of the earth is covered by forest. I think you have to recheck that, because even the earth itself is only about 30% of the earth's cover. And the latest statistics that I know about the forest cover on earth is about 30%. So maybe you sort of misplaced or mistook the numbers. Okay, that's all. Thank you.
All right, so we will improve and we will do more research after this. So thank you for that comment.
Okay, welcome.
If there are no more comments or questions from the judges, I'd like to open the. Unfortunately we have run out of time for Q&A sessions, so we will give some time for the judges to fill in their scores, and then we will soon move on to the next presentation coming from SSP. As possible. It was quite shocking to see three of them appear at the same time. Now we'll move on to the next presentation coming from SSP on their Sustainable Development Goal to good health and well-being.
Can you hear me? Right, I will start. Health is a human right, hence it is our duty to ensure all individuals receive the health services that they need without the suffering of financial hardships. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh and greetings to honorable judges, teachers, and all participants. My name is Edna Mariam Hassanuddin, along with my partner, Nurul Nadia Har Akram, representatives of Sekolah Sri Putri. Today, we'll be presenting and sharing our thoughts and ideas regarding the motion that was given to us under the third SDG, which is good health and well-being. The main priority of this goal is to ensure healthy lives and promote well-being for everyone at all ages, and why is this? Why having a good health and well-being is important is because realize that individuals with high levels of well-being and good health are the ones that are more productive at work, and they are the ones who are more likely to contribute. Excuse me. Oh, I'm so sorry. And realize that those are the people that are more likely to contribute to the society, which is what we hope for in today's world, and realize those are what lead to the increase in human capital, which is a central trust to a sustainable economic growth and the development of our country. Good health also allows children, adolescents, and teenagers to learn and allows adults to earn. And it also helps people to escape poverty, where the Malaysian has suffered the reduced trend of poverty when the COVID hits, where in 2019 the poverty rate in Malaysia is about 5.6%, where it increases to 8.4% in 2020, and realize that having a good health also provides the basis for long-term economic growth and the development of the nation. Now, our main target for today is under the third SDG 3.C, which is increase health financing and support workforce in developing countries. Malaysia is uses a predominant tax finance system where the government contributes specifically towards the financing health services. And the parallel and healthcare financing means the activity of raising or collecting revenue to pay for the operation of a healthcare system. And our goal is to achieve equity of the healthcare financing here in Malaysia. And Malaysia uses 5 main finance sources for healthcare, which are taxation, social health insurance, private health insurance, and out-of-pocket payments. An in-depth understanding of the equity implications would help the policy makers in achieving equitable financing. Malaysia consists of a dual healthcare system of a heavily subsidized public sector and the user charge private sector, which has produced a progressive health finance system. The parallel existence of these public and private health services allows the rich to voluntarily switch to the private health services, whilst the poor rely solely on the public health services. And why having a quality healthcare why having a quality financial management is important is because it goes hand in hand with the patient safety and quality of the care given by patients. And public hospitals tend to provide lower quality care than non-profit hospitals. Why? This is because hospitals that earn more profit can finance future investments and offer higher wages, which in turn which in turn can attract more skilled staff, and the quality of care rises. And when rising in quality happens, it falls to better profits and also more capital to invest in both innovation and expertise. I'll explain a little bit, like a brief explanation on public and the private. So the private health sector is driven by demand of the affluent, and it is perceived to be of higher quality than public hospitals. And they are equipped with large and lavish technology, and they charges user fees on patients by through out-of-pocket payments. Whereas government, they only charges almost free of charge to outpatients and any other patients, etc. So moving on to our problem statement under the finance and healthcare is that government subsidies are for all citizens, meaning the affluent are permitted to receiving the government subsidies. I know it's fair for these affluent people to receive it as well, but however, the government should be wise to permit these T20 people to use subsidies for public healthcare in moderate, meaning that sometimes these affluent people can use the subsidies. However, sometimes they have to pay the premium price depending on their financial situations, because realize that OOP or out-of-pocket payments can also lead these affluents to poverty. Our solution is to eliminate subsidies for all citizens and create a new system where these subsidies are channeled to the middle and lower income citizens. How does this system work is that the government should update personal information on identification card number, and when the vulnerable are receiving these public health treatments, their information will help to recognize that individual's financial status, and the government will see whether these affluent people are eligible to receive the subsidies at present. Meaning, if their financial situation did not support it, then they can receive the subsidies at that time. And realize, in order to create a united nation, not only the government, but the citizens themselves must be a part of achieving this goal, meaning that all citizens must realize that we live in a developing country where the affluent and the less fortunate coexist. And we have to understand that one party cannot afford to such essentials. This means that we are reliving the principle of having a caring society, which is one of the 9 challenges in the Vision 2020. So we are using the past experience into the future in order to achieve a caring society and a well-developed community. Now, moving on to, this is the overall Ministry of Health budget. Realize that it has increased according to the development of the country, meaning that our government is worried about the health status of the nation. So this is a good step of the government because this means that they put an effort to improve in health care system and etc. Now we're moving on to our another point. Now I'm going to explain a little bit on the field of careers. So health workers consist of registered nurses, medical doctors, midwives, and physicians, and etc. And an issue regarding this topic is the inadequacy of health workers. In most recent times, in 2015, the Ministry of Health have no longer arranged internship placements, and medical graduates are to apply to the government hospitals that offers the internship by themselves. This results in the delayed postings and job offers, as there are limited vacancies and increasing number of medical graduates. It affects the trainings. Realize that it affects the trainings and skills received by these medical graduates, and they also be in debt since they have no income to cover that in debt. and realize brain drain will occur. Brain drain means that medical graduates feel the need to depart to another country to seek for better opportunities, and realize that our nation's goal is actually to improve the well-being and to serve the country. So if this brain drain keeps increasing, we can't achieve the human capital, but it will decreases. This issue have greatly impacted individual, community, and country. Available doctors now in hospitals suffer from inconsistent working hours, and because they have to do like extra work, and it doesn't sit well. However, it doesn't sit well with their inadequate income, which can cost to low quality lifestyle, which is something that we do not want to perceive at the end of the day. The community also may experience low quality of patient care from time to time due to being overworked. Hence, and here is our solution. The government should terminate unproductive ministers so that we could build more hospitals and institutions, so that building more hospitals and institutions can be put into investment. Hence, it will increase the employment opportunities. Lastly, and our last solution is to provide more opportunities for younger doctors. Older doctors are to step down and hand over their positions. However, the government are not firing these workers, but let them become an active educator and trainers to sharpen their skills of potential specialists. You can argue that these experienced doctors have a wealthier knowledge that may be very important in helping with your particular health challenges. However, a study done by Dr. Yusuke Sugawa of the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health said that our findings suggest that the impact outcome may be larger than that of the experience accumulated by doctors. Having a well-taken care health can solve many problems in the society, but we don't actually realize how it can affect everyone and even the future of our nation. So I hope we could all one day achieve this goal and raise awareness with the best of our abilities to help citizens and future generations to strive for opportunities. If our country can make progress in health and well-being of the nation, I assure you we can achieve other health-related goals in order to achieve an established economy. And with that, I thank you.
Thank you very much, SSP, for that wonderful presentation. Although I have said this before in the last presentation, but do take care of the time. As you can see in the chat, you've been over around 30 seconds. So I hope the next competitor, Star B, does apply by the time rules that we have set. Thank you very much. And now we move on right straight to the Q&A session. Judges, do we have any questions for SSP's presentation?
Thank you, Idna, for your presentation. This is a very interesting topic and timely, I think. We talk about health care system. I think finance plays a very important role in this particular area, especially for those who are unable to pay for their medical expenses. They might not be able to even buy insurance. How do you see the way to look into that particular problem? Thank you.
So that's a brilliant question coming from the judge. How we can see whether these less fortunate people are being taken care of is that when the parallel existence of these public and private health services, okay, the poor rely solely on these public health services. Hence, whenever, because we could see that private, compared to private, if we were to compare private health services and public health services, realize that the waiting time is very long in the public health sector compared to the private health sector, meaning this is a problem that everyone could see and could take and into improve more, and the government should always be fully aware of the problems that these unfortunate people receive. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Judge, for that excellent question. Next, are there any more questions coming from the judges?
I think MCKK has a question.
Okay. Now we open the questions towards the floor. Any questions for the participants towards SSP's presentation?
Yes, we from Intercom has a question. Okay. Regarding the issues about health workers, what are your resolutions to solve the issues made by the movement called Cartel by Dr. Contract that has been circulating since 2021 until now? Thank you.
All right, thank you very much for that question. All right, thank you very much for that question. Well, we believe that by terminating the position of these ministers, which means to reduce the size of the cabinet, is more effective, as once said by Dr. Johari. Why? Because small cabinets means that we can hasten the decision-making process for government policies, and hence the new policy can be implemented faster, and hence our country will not be left behind. Because all right, when we're not left behind, we can attract investment, which in return provide more job opportunities for Malaysian. And well, during the administration of Tashi Muhyiddin Yassin, he had 32 ministers and 38 deputy ministers in total. However, during the current administration under Dato Anwar Ibrahim, he has reduced the number of his ministers to 28 and 27 deputy ministers. We also believe that there are few ministries that shouldn't be split into two, such as education and Ministry of Education and Higher Education, as it belongs under the same aspect. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you very much, and I think that concludes the Q&A session. I will give some time for the judges to fill in the score sheets. So take a short break.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, now that we are done with the Q&A session and all the judges have filled in their score sheets, we move on to the last and final but not least presentation of today's second session, coming from Starbucks.
All right, give me time for a while. Let me set my timer. Before that, am I audible and the screen is clear?
Yes, I can hear you.
All right, thank you for confirmation. All right. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Now, as we all know, good health and the well-being of a human is a very important aspect of our life, and it has affected everybody in this world we currently known as. And we should know that every human really values their own health, because we never know where we're going to get sick. We never know where the time of our life is going to end it. So that's why we want to make sure that our life will have always a good health and hence a well-being. And I am Muhammad Ashraf over here representing Star B. My friend over here, John Akil, will be the one controlling the slide. Now, moving on. What are the list of concepts that we're going to be searching on today is that first thing first, we're going to take a look on the definition of what health is really about. Second, we're going to see the objective of our presentation today, the terms that we're going to introduce, the issues that we're going to be facing, and the solutions that we're going to bring up to actually solve the issue in the first place. Now, some of you may not know about it, but health is actually the definition by it, a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease and infirmity. So it's safe to say that if you don't have anything stated in that definition, then it's safe to say that you're not human at all, since health meets all four of those things. All right. Now, what our objective is to actually complete this presentation of ours is that first thing is that we'd like to know the context of issues that we are facing. So we want to know what problems or global problems that we, the world, are actually facing, or maybe some countries are facing due to lack of maybe healthcare or due to healthcare being too expensive. Number two is that we're going to pinpoint the exact factors of the issues. What are the root cause of these problems? What are the initiative costs that have these issues served up in the first place? And number three, we're going to identify what solutions are best to actually solve these problems in the first place. Now, some might not know is that healthcare, by definition of it, is that an organization of people, institution, and resource that delivers healthcare services to meet the health needs of target population. So, take example for if China with large population, you need a really large healthcare system to actually meet the needs of the citizens itself. If your country such as Malaysia, you don't need that much of healthcare because, well, the population is not quite as large as China itself. Well, the definitions of poverty is that a state of condition in which people of communities lack the financial resource and essentials for a minimum standard of living. Now, we don't have to go far and look on poverty always affect third world countries. We can see that sometimes poverty can even affect countries like developing countries such as Malaysia, or even top global superpowers such as the three countries, which is Russia, China, and Malaysia. I mean, America, sorry. No. The current issue of we're going to be talking about today is that healthcare being too expensive, mostly on America. Why? Because we have to realize that America is actually essentially the country with the largest economy in the world, and yet the healthcare is too expensive. We might see that why didn't the government subsidize all this healthcare if the economy being the largest in the world? Well, let's go on find out. No, we've seen that poverty does not just only affect people in third world countries, but also such countries such as America. Now, what do people in America that living in condition of poverty is facing is that, number one, they have lower access to healthcare. This means that they couldn't have any accessibility to healthcare. They couldn't, go to hospital and go buy some medicines. They couldn't go to, get ER if they go to have accident or stuff like that. Number two, there's higher risk of adverse health effects, such as, smoking, chronic stress, and number 3, high rates of disability and mortality rate. Now, explanations on why does this happen is most people in countries in US can't even afford to have access to healthcare, although US has the largest economy, and we can't seem to know the reason why. But today we're going to know why, because we just have to look on all sides. Now, number 2 is that people in poverty are more likely to be affected by adverse health effects caused by bad living condition. So we've seen that in America, in some places, there's still people taking drugs. There's still people smoking. There is still some people, not going to good living condition, not living their health. Safe to say is that their lifestyle is not as good as what they think it is. And number 3 is that people living in poverty are at a greater risk of developing various types of disabilities. This often due to malnutrition, poor medical care, and lack access of clean drinking water. And all of that, we would like to solve today's problem on how we're going to ensure healthcare is accessibility to everyone in America. Now, as we all know, since healthcare become too expensive, there's always going to be this gruesome cycle that's going on in America. Now, first thing is that poor people are going to fall ill, and second, they couldn't afford healthcare, and last but not least, they either go die or they just disease that they have on themselves just spreads. So it's a gruesome cycle that we seem cannot to escape every single day. But today the cycle ends with the solution we're going to bring. Okay, so what is the root cause of these problems in the first place? Why this issue is true? Why does this issue surface? Because first thing first, it was the government's policy to actually ensure the healthcare to be that expensive. Why? Because in America, the demand for this hospital supply, the demand for this healthcare, the demand of people wanting medicines every day is increasing day by day, year by year, and decade by decade. Hence, that's why the government had to actually increase their spending based on their to ensure the needs of citizens. And because of that, because of the supply getting low each day, each year, they had to to ensure the economies keep going. They had to make the healthcare expensive. So because of that, most of the citizens couldn't even access it. Right, moving on. All right, now this is something that we need to actually take a look on. 44% of Americans that struggle to afford healthcare. We've seen that this is such a large number because America is such a large country with large population. So 44% is really a lot of people. And 93% of Americans felt like the ER, the healthcare they pay for isn't worth it because, well, it's too expensive. So just one day you can get into accidents, you can go to ER and you feel like, well, I shouldn't be safe because, well, the healthcare is too expensive. They feel like this thing is just something the government made up just to get benefits out of them. Now, as you can see on this graph, is that the amount of spent by the US government on healthcare. As you can see from 2016 until 2020, the increase has been spending steadily and rising. And by 2027, it's expected to be on more than 5 billion, which is a lot considering that we on Malaysia don't even spend that much on healthcare. Now, as we all know, the best solution, the best way to ask for solution is to just ask some random guy on Twitter, and they provided it with this kind of answer: is that the government just needs to increase the diplomatic relationship between countries. It's just that easy. Now, we have to come to understanding on why do US citizens pay healthcare. For reason number one is that they pay for their facilities for medicines and hospital supplies. And number two, US healthcare system is complex, and most of the costs such as medicines and the facilities are market driven. And number three is that high and unregulated prescription drug costs and healthcare providers' salaries rank higher than in Western nations. So it's safe to say is that the prescription for each and every one of sick people in America are unregulated. Hence, some might get more than the others, even though they pay the same. So how this solution is going to work? How does we actually increasing diplomatic relationship is going to solve this problem? Is that by number one, countries can help each other by subsidizing the facilities, medicines, and hospital supplies. It looks like countries like US would have no need to put a healthcare at such a high cost. It looks like they don't even need to actually create something themselves because they can just get the import and exports out from other countries. Hence, that's why we want this diplomatic relationship to be possible. Now, why would this ever work? Why would countries help subsidize US costs in the first place? No, number one is that US economy is the largest in the world. So it would make sense for you, if you want to improve your economy, to actually subsidize some of their costs, and in return, they actually buy your stuff. Number two, if a country decides to help subsidize US costs, their import and export activity with US will increase, thus improving the economies inside the country. And third, both countries will gain benefit. So our solution is a win-win situation. Now, this is a set example if China and America were to have such a good diplomatic relationship and having their export and import activities ahead. Moving on. So at the end of the day, why is this problem highlighted? Because we all know in America, many citizens are suffering due to healthcare are being unaffordable. And because of this, unnecessary death is caused because of them couldn't afford such basic needs. And we as a human, we need to realize health is the greatest gift that's been given to us. It's been bestowed upon us, and we should need to take good care of it. And that's why, with all the reasons I gave you, I'm very proud to present this solution. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Starby, for that wonderful presentation. Now we move straight to the Q&A session for the Starby presentation. First of all, are there any questions from the judges? If there are no questions from the judges, we open this. We open the Q&A session to the floor. So anyone, any participants want to ask questions?
All right. Firstly, how is the solution exclusively diplomatic? And second, sure, I think it is intuitive to see it in the context of like a bigger first world nation or another first world nation in order to improve the healthcare. However, I understand that if we try to contextualize this into a third world context, most bigger states will often leverage the fact that they are bigger economic superpowers in order to exploit the natural resources of smaller nations. And secondly, how is it out of the table that you could do local policy and budgetary reforms in order to improvise healthcare? Because it might be exclusive that pharmaceutical companies in the US can only provide you with certain medicine. However, we tell that it should only be exclusive to that context. We tell that there are many more local options that exist.
I'm very sorry to apologize. Can you actually simplify your questions a bit? Or repeat the questions?
First, how is it? It's uncharitable to say that the situation is exclusively diplomatic. Secondly, it's very intuitive for you to say that the US and China can help each other in terms of like developing their own healthcare industries. But if the context is in a third world, if the context in which the third world nation is on the other side, we tell that first world nations can weaponize their economic superiority and size in order to exploit the natural resources of a smaller nation. Thirdly, how is it out of the question that we can perform budgetary and policy reforms in order to expand the local healthcare industry?
All right. To answer some of your questions, is that we believe that even if that we believe that America couldn't rely much on their own local hospitals. They couldn't rely much on their whole local supply. So that's why we opt to actually do diplomatic solutions and actually try to reach out to other countries and ask them for help, and subsidize America itself. Here's the thing. America isn't one of the countries that have one of the biggest healthcare in the world. We can see that even in COVID pandemic, even America has one of the highest case, and because of that, they had to ask help. They had to resort in diplomatic solutions. They cannot rely on their own self to actually create the vaccines. They had to rely on maybe China. They had to rely on other countries such as Japan to just create that vaccines and being sold to them. So by that example alone, we can see that this method is actually not that quite bad after all. Now, I hope that answers some of your questions. We couldn't really hear most of it because the internet's breaking up.
Thank you very much. Do we still have time for Q&A? Okay. So are there any other questions about this? Okay, so if there are no more questions, then I believe we can end the Q&A session here. We now move on to a break so that all judges can fill in their Google Forms for your points. Give them to the closing ceremony. You'll probably get the announcements during the actual closing ceremony on Thursday night. So thank you all for being here. Thank you, delegates, for presenting your wonderful ideas, some kind of awe-inspiring and mind-opening ideas. I mean, there are some ideas that I haven't even thought of when we approach these certain issues during our preparations. Thank you to the judges for willing to be here and judge this youth leadership of this year. Thank you very much for attending and giving us points and helping these delegates through their process in the Q&A sessions especially. Thank you very much to our team of organizers who have successfully created live streaming and handle all the camera, lights, and action. So to close the event, the main event of Star Confex 6th edition, I believe that if there is, I guess we can just end it here. Thank you very much for attending. We hope to see you again towards the closing ceremony. I hope for the best for everyone. And I hope everyone can learn from this competition. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Waalaikumsalam.